The story begins in America, at one of the most prestigious colleges, MIT. At this moment, we see Professor Gerald teaching his math class. After finishing the lecture, he tells his students that he's going to write a very difficult math problem on the board outside the classroom. He announces that whoever solves it will have their name written in golden letters in the college's history. He motivates them further by saying, "Some of my students have solved such questions before, and today they're at the top of their fields." The question was extremely tough, so he gives the students time until the end of the semester to solve it carefully. After the class ends, we see a young man named Will Hunting, who works as a janitor at MIT. He notices the math problem Professor Gerald had written on the board. Later that night, Will goes home and starts solving the equation on his bathroom mirror. The next day, when no one is around, he picks up a piece of chalk and writes down the answer. It was a big deal because he solved the question in just one day. Besides his job, Will spends most of his time hanging out with his friends. One day, while watching a baseball game, he sees a boy who used to bully him in school. Seeing him, Will's anger explodes. He goes up to the boy with his friends and starts a fight. Will beats him badly before his friends finally pull him back to stop the fight. But by then, the police arrive. When an officer tries to stop him, Will attacks the officer too. Because of this, he gets arrested. Meanwhile, Professor Gerald finds out that the math problem he had written has been solved. He rushes to check and discovers that someone has actually solved it perfectly. He asks his brightest students if any of them did it, but when everyone denies, the professor is completely shocked. In his next class, the room is full. Everyone is curious to know who that mysterious math genius is. The professor says, "Whoever solved it, please come forward. I want to give you your reward." But everyone just looks at each other. No one steps forward. Since no one admits it, the professor writes another math problem, one that took him 2 years to solve himself. He thinks, let's see if this mystery genius can solve this one so easily. On the other side, Will has just been released from jail. He returns to work, finishes cleaning, and starts solving the new problem. At that very moment, Professor Gerald comes out of his office and sees Will writing something on the board. He tries to stop him, thinking Will might be scribbling nonsense. But when the professor gets closer, Will quickly runs away. Later, when the professor returns, he's shocked. The problem is solved again, perfectly. The very question that took him 2 years to solve, this boy solved in a short time. Now the professor finally knows who the secret math genius is. After work, Will meets his friends and goes to a bar for some drinks. There, his friend Chucky notices a group of beautiful girls and walks over to flirt with them. To impress the girls, Chucky lies and says he's an MIT student too, a genius. Suddenly, a guy nearby interrupts and asks, "Oh really? Which class do you take?" Chucky replies, "History." The guy immediately understands that he's lying. The guy started mocking Chucky and deliberately began asking him questions about history topics. Poor Chucky didn't know anything, so he stayed completely silent. At that moment, Will stepped forward to defend his friend and began debating with the guy. Will had a special gift. Whatever he read, he never forgot. His facts were sharp and his speech was clear. Within moments, he completely shut the other guy down. Will humiliated him, saying, "You've just memorized lines from a book. You don't even think for yourself. You're spending thousands of dollars just to learn things I've read for free at the public library." Everyone around started laughing, and the guy, embarrassed, walked away angrily. After that, one of the girls, named Skylar, came to Will and gave him her phone number. She was impressed by his intelligence and said, "Call me sometime when you have the time." Later, Will even showed that number to the guy who tried to act smart earlier, just to make fun of him. Meanwhile, Professor Gerald was trying to find the janitor who had solved his impossible math problem so easily. After some inquiries, he got Will's contact information and went straight to his court hearing. Will had been charged for assaulting a police officer. In court, he tried to defend himself, but the judge reminded him of his criminal record, past charges of theft and violence. The judge said, "I can't ignore an attack on a police officer," and sentenced him to jail unless he paid bail worth $400,000. So Will was sent to jail. But there, Professor Gerald visited him with an offer. He said, "I've spoken to the judge. I can get you out, but you'll have to agree to 2 conditions. The first condition was that Will would study mathematics with him. The second, that he would attend therapy sessions with a counselor." Will laughed at first, but since he didn't want to stay in jail and had no other option, he agreed. Soon, he began math sessions with Professor Gerald, who was stunned by Will's extraordinary intelligence. Now came the second condition, therapy. But no matter which therapist he met, Will never opened up. Instead, he mocked them. Before each session, he would read their books, memorize everything, and then use their own words to insult them. Finally, as a last resort, Professor Gerald turned to his old friend, Sean McGuire, who now taught psychology. At first, Sean refused, saying he didn't have time for this. But when Gerald explained, this boy is special. If he doesn't find the right path, he'll waste his life, Sean agreed to meet him. Just like before, Will had already read Sean's book and tried to make fun of him too. But Sean stayed calm and spoke to him normally, without prying into his personal life. Then Will's eyes fell on a painting Sean had made himself. Seeing the painting and some art books, Will started making absurd remarks about Sean's life. Sean ignored it at first, but then Will brought up Sean's wife. The moment his wife was mentioned, Sean became serious. Will realized that Sean's weak point was his late wife, so he kept bringing her up, even asking, "Where is your wife? Did she leave you for someone else?" Hearing this, Sean lost his temper, grabbed Will by the collar, and warned him, "Never disrespect my wife again." Will just smirked and said, "Your time's up." Sean let him go, and Will walked out thinking he had broken another therapist. Seeing Sean's anger, Professor Gerald assumed he wouldn't continue the sessions. But to his surprise, Sean said, "No, I'll keep meeting him. Bring him every week." Later, Will went on a date with Skylar. He learned she came from a very wealthy family and was studying at Harvard. They spent a wonderful time together, and at the end of their first date, they kissed. The next week, when Will met Sean again, Sean suggested they go for a walk in the park. There, he calmly told Will, "I thought a lot about what you said. I realized you're just a kid who doesn't know what he's talking about. You're rude, but I get it. You're scared. You don't want to talk, but remember, someday you'll have to. Otherwise, you'll lose all the good things in life." The next day, Will went to work at a construction site with his friend Chucky. Will tried to call Skylar but was too nervous to talk. In his third therapy session with Sean, Will didn't say a single word, and Sean didn't either. Both of them sat in complete silence for an entire hour. The fourth session started the same way, quiet and tense. But then, out of boredom, Will cracked a joke. Sean took that as a sign that maybe Will was finally ready to open up. Sean asked him, "Do you have a girlfriend?" Will smiled and told him about Skylar, how their first date went wonderfully but now he couldn't bring himself to talk to her again. Sean asked, "Why not?" Will replied, "I think Skylar is way too good for me. If I keep seeing her, eventually she'll realize that I'm not good enough for her. It's better to walk away before she finds out." Sean gently explained, "No one is better than anyone. Everyone has their own strengths and flaws. What matters is whether that person is right for you, not whether they're perfect." To make Will understand better, Sean shared a story about his late wife. He said, "She was an amazing woman. I loved her deeply, but sometimes she would fart in her sleep." Hearing this, Will burst into laughter, and so did Sean. The room, once heavy with silence, filled with laughter and warmth. For the first time, Will felt a real connection with Sean. He started feeling comfortable around him. At the end of the session, Sean advised him, "Go talk to the girl." Will was so lost in the conversation that Sean had to remind him, "Our time's up. Go now." Following Sean's advice, Will went to Skylar's college and asked her out again. Skylar said, "I'd love to, but I'm stuck with this incredibly hard math problem that might take me days to solve." Will smiled and said, "Show me the problem." The moment he saw it, he solved it instantly on a napkin. Then he grinned and said, "Now you've got no excuse. Come with me." On their second date, Skylar asked about his family. Will lied and said, "I have 12 brothers." Skylar was surprised and asked him to name them all. Will quickly rattled off 12 random names in order. "Suspicious," she said. "Say them again." But being a genius, Will repeated all 12 names perfectly in the same order. Later, in his next therapy session, Will asked Sean, "Do you ever regret meeting your wife? She's gone now, and you're all alone. Doesn't that hurt?" Sean smiled softly and told him the story of how they met. "I first saw her standing in line to buy tickets for a baseball game. It was a legendary match," he said. Will said, "Wow, you must have been so lucky to see it live." Sean replied, "Actually, I didn't. I skipped the game to go on a date with her instead." Will was shocked. "You missed that game? For a girl?" Sean said, "Yes, and I never regretted it. Not even once. Those years with her were the best years of my life, no matter how short they were." Meanwhile, Skylar started questioning why Will wouldn't introduce her to his friends or family. He was still lying about his past but finally agreed to let her meet his friends. Skylar, Will, and his friends went out together. She liked them all, and they had a great time. Later, Professor Gerald visited Sean to check on Will's progress. Sean said, "He's opening up slowly. It'll take more time before he fully trusts me." Gerald said, "I'm finding top job offers for him. He'll ace any interview. Once his mind is healed, no one can stop him from becoming a great mathematician." Sean disagreed. "You're not his father. Stop deciding his life for him. Let him choose his own path." Just because he's a genius doesn't mean he has to follow your plan. But Gerald insisted he's too talented to waste his life. Will, however, wasn't interested in any job. He didn't want that kind of life. So, as a prank, he sent his friend Chucky to one of his job interviews in his place. One night, Skylar said, "Come with me to California." Hearing this, Will panicked. "I can't. My whole life is here." Skylar said softly, "I know you love me. Then why are you so scared to be with me? Why won't you ever tell me the truth?" She confronted him. "You lied about your 12 brothers." Hearing this, Will snapped. He shouted, "You want to know the truth? I'm an orphan. I never knew my parents. I grew up in foster homes, getting beaten like a dog." Skylar began to cry and said, "That doesn't matter. I'm here for you. I'll stay with you no matter what." But Will pushed her away. "I don't need anyone's help," he yelled. Deep down, Will was terrified of letting anyone in, afraid that if someone came close and then left, it would destroy him. Skylar, crying, said, "I love you. I'll never leave you." But Will coldly said, "I don't love you," and walked out, leaving her heartbroken. Later, under pressure from Professor Gerald, Will agreed to take a job interview. He went, but didn't make any effort to get the job. In his next therapy session, Sean asked, "Who do you trust the most in your life?" Will paused and thought deeply. Will replied, "I trust my friend Chucky the most." Sean nodded and said, "Yes, I agree. He's like a brother to you. He would give his life for you. But you can't spend your whole life depending only on your friends, can you?" Then Sean asked, "So, how do you plan to earn your living?" Will replied, "I'll work as a laborer. I know construction really well. I'll do it my whole life, earn money, eat, and survive." Sean looked at him and said, "You've spent your whole life doing physical labor, so it's become your comfort zone. You're afraid to step outside it. But that fear will stop you from living a great life." Sean didn't tell him to take the job Gerald was offering. Instead, he asked Will, "What do you really want to do with your life?" Will joked, "I want to herd sheep and goats." Realizing Will wasn't serious, Sean got frustrated. "I don't want to waste my time. If you're not going to be honest, then leave. Maybe you've got time to waste. I don't." Will grew angry and started yelling at Sean. Sean calmly asked again, "What do you want to do with your life?" Will stayed silent. Sean pointed to the door and said, "Get out. Go." Before Skylar left for California, Will called her one last time to say goodbye. Skylar told him, "I love you." Will smiled but couldn't say it back. His fear of heartbreak still held him back. He still believed that eventually, everyone leaves. The next day, while talking to Chucky, Will said, "I'm not taking any job. Skylar's gone now too. We'll just work construction here, live in the neighborhood, have a simple life." Hearing this, Chucky spoke from his heart. He said, "Look, man, 10 years from now, I'll still be here. But if you're still here too, I'll be heartbroken. Every morning when I come to pick you up, I hope I knock on your door and you're not there, because that would mean you've moved on, doing something better with your life." Meanwhile, Professor Gerald and Sean argued about Will. Gerald said, "Why can't we make him take a job? He's wasting his talent." Sean replied, "We can't force him to make big life decisions. He doesn't even know what he truly wants yet. He's scared of being abandoned. That's why he pushes people away." Gerald disagreed. "Don't let him ruin his life." "What, you want to make him a failure like you?" Sean calmly said, "I'm not a failure. I chose this life. I'm happy with it." At that moment, Will entered and overheard their conversation. Gerald left the room, and the therapy session began. Sean opened a file. Inside were pictures of Will's body showing bruises from his foster father's beatings. Sean asked, "Have you ever seen a child beaten this brutally?" Then Sean quietly shared, "My father was an alcoholic. He used to beat me and my mother every day." Hearing Sean's story, Will was reminded of his own painful childhood. Sean stepped closer and said softly, "Whatever happened to you, son, it's not your fault." Will nodded slightly, but Sean repeated, "It's not your fault." Will tried to brush it off, saying, "Yeah, I know." But Sean kept saying, "It's not your fault. It's not your fault." Eventually, Will broke down. His eyes filled with tears. He pushed Sean away, but Sean stepped closer again, saying, "It's not your fault." Finally, Will collapsed into Sean's arms and cried uncontrollably. For the first time, he let go of all the pain he had carried for years. He was ready to move forward, to live. Will decided to accept one of the job offers Professor Gerald had arranged for him. His final therapy session ended there. Before leaving, Will asked, "If I ever feel like talking again, can I come back?" Sean smiled and said, "My door is always open for you." Will hugged him and said goodbye. On his 21st birthday, his friends gifted him a car. It wasn't new, but Will was deeply touched. It was from his best friends. Later, Professor Gerald met Sean, apologized for calling him a failure, and they reconciled as old friends. Sean told him he was was going on a world tour. I make enough to enjoy life, he said with a smile. As Sean packed his bags, Will drove to his house, left a letter in his mailbox, and quietly left. The next morning, Chucky came to pick Will up for work. He knocked on the door, but no one answered. He peeked through the window. The house was empty. Chucky smiled. He understood. Will had finally made his decision to move on. Sean later found the letter in his mailbox. It read, "I'm not taking the job. I'm going to California to see about a girl." Sean smiled warmly and whispered, "Good for you, kid." He walked back inside, proud and happy. The genius had finally chosen his own path.